I'm Sean DeLaney, and you're listening to What Got You There. What Got You There is a must-follow for entrepreneurs, creatives, high achievers, and change makers. Each week, I sit down with some of the world's most influential people and focus on the journey behind their success. We uncover the strategy, tactics, and routines that help them get there. Now it's your journey, so it's time to learn what's going to get you there.
What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with got you?
I have a definition of genius, and I'm certainly not a genius. I think a genius is a person who changes the world, who is so innovative that they come up with ideas that other people embrace, and as a result of that engagement with other people and that change, the world heads in a new direction.
Professor Craig Wright, creator of Yale University's popular Genius course, explores what we can learn from brilliant minds that have changed the world. Einstein, Beethoven, Picasso, Jobs. The word genius evokes these iconic figures whose cultural contributions have irreversibly shaped society. Yet Beethoven could not multiply. Picasso couldn't pass a fourth grade math test, and Jobs left high school with a 2.65 GPA. What does this say about our metrics for measuring success and achievement today? Professor Wright has devoted more than 2 decades to exploring these questions and probing the nature of this term, which is deeply embedded in our culture. In The Hidden Habits of Genius, he reveals what we can learn from the lives of those we have dubbed as geniuses, past and present, and looks at the 14 key traits of genius, from curiosity to creative maladjustment to obsession.
Craig, welcome to What Got You There. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much, Sean, for inviting me. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, exploring a lot of things that I'm innately curious about. But before we hit on geniuses and all of your work, I'm really intrigued by, did you know what you wanted to do your entire life, or is this something you discovered later in life?
Oh, wow. Life is wonderful. I started out, you'll never believe this, Sean. When I was age 18, I could accept one of 2 scholarships. I could take a golf scholarship to the University of Maryland, or I could take a scholarship, a lesser scholarship, to the Eastman School of Music to be trained to be a classical concert pianist. I declined the golf scholarship, though I really love to play golf. I declined it because other kids, even at age 18, were beating me. And I figured, well, if I'm already losing to them, I'm not going to make much money at this. So off I went to the Eastman School of Music, which is really hard to get into. It's like Juilliard and Curtis. And it was playing competitions against the best in Washington, D.C. at that point. And I went there and I graduated from there, but I learned one thing there, that I had very little musical talent. I had a lot of industry. I worked very hard. I was given a fine pianist to practice on, the best teachers in Washington, D.C., and then at Eastman in Rochester, New York. But lo and behold, I didn't have a great musical memory, and I didn't have perfect pitch. I was lacking some of the essential gifts that are needed to make a first-rate creative musician. So there was this mantra going around music conservatories: if you can't create, you perform. If you can't perform, you teach. So I said to myself, well, maybe I'll be a teacher. I'll be a teacher in colleges because they seem pretty neat. A good place to be, interesting place to be. So off I went to Harvard to get a PhD in what's called musicology, the sort of history of music. And that was fun. And I became, of all things, a medieval musicologist, working with medieval music, which required me to go to Europe and live in monasteries for a period of time. And no kidding, I did that, poverty, chastity, and obedience. Well, I was having some trouble with some of those, shall we say. So that wasn't going to work out so well for me. I didn't just sign up to be a Benedictine monk, although they were very gracious and would always welcome me. I would go through the rituals and go to all the services and study the manuscripts, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, I got a job teaching at Yale. And that was really cool because here's the deal. If you're a college professor and you get tenure, wow, that's a really great job. First of all, you have to work very hard as a young person. I'm convinced, thinking about things, that the most critical decades in your life or the 20s and 30s. The 20s may be the most critical in terms of getting out there and getting ahead in your profession. 30s are the most pressure packed because you've got your own profession that you're responsible for, and you've got domestic considerations. If you have a partner, if you have offspring that you're dealing with, that's really hard to do all of that at once. But once, if you can be in a university situation, get tenure, then you're given something of a carte blanche. Presumably you're there to do what you were hired to do. But I got bored with what I was hired to do. I woke up one day and said, what's new in the Middle Ages? So I started playing with somebody called Mozart, and he turned out to be very, very fascinating. And then I went on, I said, well, there's more than music here. Why don't this guy's really very interesting, got interested in Leonardo Da Vinci. I'm going to start a course on genius here. Well, wait a minute. We don't have any courses on genius in the Department of Music or the School of Music. You're going to have to go somewhere else to do this. So I started doing it in the humanities program. And I did that for a while. And then as I was doing that, and that was fascinating, and I ditched all the courses that I was hired to teach and just did the genius class and one basic music class. Then I got very interested in online education. And I am proud to say that I actually taught Yale's first online course. This was 10 years ago. And it was a struggle. And they said, well, this guy's interested in this online education, will make him academic director of online education at Yale. Well, that sounded very impressive. The only thing was I knew very little about this, but it sounded like a really cool thing to explore. And it was. And we were doing all kinds of weird tests and things. Could we link together? This was amazing. All across the campus, 8 people at once on one screen and see each other. And it all seems so primitive now, but that's what we were doing. And it was a battle because the faculty, of course, thought, well, online, that's the kiss of death. That's going to kill our whole entire teaching profession. If we bring efficiency to this particular marketplace, we'll all be out of business. So it was a battle. I remember going to faculty meetings and being pilloried by people that thought this was the forecast of doomsday. But lo and behold, over time, things change, and you need innovation from time to time. So how I got to where I got, I think, was initially having doors close and being forced to go in different directions. Eventually, I got to a place by working hard where doors began to open, and I could head in a number of directions, and I would head in a particular direction, and then lo and behold, other doors would open. Wow, that's really interesting over there. What would happen if we did that? And go into that door, and it's still going on. I mean, I've written a book here called The Hidden Habits of Genius. Now, I'm supposed to be writing books on medieval musicology. So how does this happen? Because I started doing academic books and realizing, hey, a bestseller here is 1,000 copies. You know that? University presses, they're ecstatic if they sell 1,000 copies. HarperCollins is throwing 1,000 copies in the gutter every second. So you realize, well, this is just so limited. Could there not be more to life than this? So then I started doing textbooks. Well, that's good, but you still have to write the textbook definition, or the public doesn't want that. So what happens if you do a trade book? Well, that has the capacity of reaching hundreds of thousands. That's very exciting. And then you learn things about that, because you learn, hey, you know what? Nobody's going to talk to you unless you have an agent. Me, a Yale professor, why do I need an agent in Manhattan? Well, you've got to have it, because they won't read your manuscript. So on and on it goes. So I'm a Yale professor. Everybody will love what I do. How do you feel after you get about 12 or 13 rejection notices from various publishers? Well, that's a learning experience too. But you learn as you go through all of this. You learn about marketing, publicity. You learn about podcasts, and on it goes. So it's all, for me, once a door opens, it's just a question of, that's interesting, let's go over there and find out what's over there. That will open up new doors. There's no wrong here. There's no decision that you make in a way that you really regret, because even the ones that seem unpleasant at the time, you learn a great deal from.
Yeah, I would love exploring this curiosity, but I'm also really interested about just overall learning and skill development because early on it seems like you were pretty good at golf, pretty good at music, and then you have to
Right.
have somewhat innate ability in terms of the classroom because of the schools you were getting into. So, what do you think you did early on just to develop your skills?
I just kept trying and trying different sorts of things. For example, you say, well, you must have been pretty good. Yep, I'm Captain B plus. I'm Captain A minus. Okay. I was pretty good at golf, but not really great. I mean, like the really fine players, and we could go into the technical aspects of that. I was pretty good at music, but not because I really had any gift. I have a sister who has absolute pitch. I had an uncle who had an absolute pitch, and he was a professional composer in New York at Hunter. So it's floating around, but that gene passed in my gene pool there. But that gene passed me. I didn't get any of that, and you need that if you want to operate at the highest level in terms of music. As to what I'm good at, I think what I found out over the years is what I am good at is taking complex issues, perhaps because I can't do it innately or genetically. I have to sit there and analyze what the heck is going on. How can that person do this and I can't do it? What is that person doing? I am forced, because I can't do it innately or genetically, to analyze a situation and then extrapolate what is going on and explain that in simple everyday terms to the average educated reader or listener or student. I think that's what I'm good at, distilling the essence of complex phenomena down to simple principles.
Well, that's the true spark of genius, isn't it?
I think in the sciences it is, but boy, I'm no genius, no kidding. I told my kids, I have 4 kids and now seven grandchildren. I told my kids, I'm writing a book on genius, and each one of them, what? Let's have a reality check here. You're a plotter. You're no genius, and they're absolutely right. I'm not a genius. I'm not representing myself as being a genius. It's having a. I don't know. I have a definition of genius, and I'm certainly not a genius. I think a genius is a person who changes the world, who is so innovative that they come up with ideas that other people embrace, and as a result of that engagement with other people and that change, the world heads in a new direction. And I'd be delighted to think so, but I'd be delusional to say that I'm in any way changing the world.
No. Believe me, we're going to dive a lot into genius, but I would love to know about your distillation process. And this could be a bit of a nuanced or abstract question, but when you come across a new topic, a new person, and you're sitting there thinking it through, do you have a specific process for that? Is it a journaling process, or are you just sitting there with your thoughts?
That's funny, Sean. Nobody's ever asked me that question. I'm not really. I've never really thought about that. What am I doing here? Oops, never thought about that one. First of all, the first thing that happens when I get something new, and usually I get something new by it's usually through a book, although it could be a video or audio format as you have here with your podcast. It could be a really good Netflix show or documentary or whatever it could be. So first thing I do when I encounter something I think is going to interest me, I get very excited. It makes me happy. There's joy here. I'm going to learn something. And that's really exciting. But let's just say that my normal process is to order a book, as I did this morning. Actually, I ordered a book of that gentleman who appeared on your show, Matt Ridley. Is that the fellow's name?
Yeah, Matt Ridley. He's the author of quite a few books, The Evolution of Everything. His recent one's about innovation and how it spreads.
So I ordered the most recent one because there seemed to be some overlap with what he was doing, what I'm interested in. So I'm waiting to get that, and it will arrive tomorrow. Courtesy of this hugely innovative genius, Jeff Bezos. So that will come, and I will start to read it, and I will start to think about it. The first thing I do is when I get the book, the next thing I do is reach for a pencil, or a pen, because I'm very old school in this way. I will sit with a book and I will underline, and I will think about it. And I'm a very slow reader. I'll think about the sentences, I'll think about the ideas, and I will write in the margin. I will underline, circle, and write in the margin points to be remembered or disagreements with that particular line. So it is a dialogue. It's a conversation with me and an authority figure. And that's one of, in my book there, Hidden Habits of Genius, one of the things I keep banging on is be a contrarian. Think backwards, argue, be argumentative. And that's in a way something I've learned with my teaching over the years that has evolved enormously from when I started as a modus operandi and where I ended up and continue to teach today. So that's a work in progress, Sean. I got to think more carefully about what it is that I'm doing as I'm doing it. I haven't really thought about that. I'll try to do better next time.
No, I mean, that's a pretty good start when you're able to argue the opposing sides. That really distills down your thinking and clears it up. You mentioned when you first received the book, you take out your pen or pencil. Do you do anything else before opening page one? Do you write down any thoughts of it or anything like that, or do you just dive right into the book?
I hope it's not going to be a disappointment. I hope it's not. There are a lot of things out there in titles that are just, there's no there. And to be direct, there are a lot of how-to books, how you can improve your life. Buy my book, and in 7 steps you'll change your life forever. There's oftentimes there's very little substance there. So, and my process, I came at this exact opposite. I was really seriously studying all these smart people. And no kidding, I was going to Krakow to look at Mozart autographs, in Berlin to look at Mozart autographs. And I would go to Florence to see what I could see there about Leonardo Da Vinci. I've been in the Ambrosiana in Milan to look at facsimiles. They didn't allow me to touch any originals of Leonardo Da Vinci, but I've seen them right up close, and the books themselves are right, in a case 2 feet from me. So I've really tried to get in there and really get into the essence of the subject matter. And that's how I was going to come at this, just with the people and the materials. And then you try to shop a book along these lines, and every publisher and editor will say, well, we've kind of seen this before. What we're interested in here are a few takeaways. How can this book change your life? Well, I was kind of disappointed in that, because I thought that might be a nonsense. The shocking thing is, and it sounds like I'm a bold-faced pitchman here. The shocking thing is, at the end of the process, lo and behold, my life really did change as a result of engaging the lives of these great minds, these great figures over time. I started to think, and I continue to think, in radically different ways than I did at the outset of this particular project. So if I say, writing this book changed my life, it can change yours too. This is not just a slimy sales pitch. In my case, yeah, I think it's true.
Yeah, no, I like I mentioned, got to explore the book this weekend and read the whole thing, and definitely had some fascinating, interesting takeaways. Not only am I a big fan of genius and history and many of the legendary leaders throughout time, but some of those takeaways, it has me looking at life in a little bit different manner as well.
Yeah. Like, don't try to be a genius.
You're right.
Make everybody miserable.
No, that's
go
very
ahead.
true.
Sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, I even just want to know a little bit more about, like, where was this fascination for you? You were teaching music. I want to know, what really was it where you said, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole of understanding geniuses?
Yeah, well, the thing that's always interested me is the biographies of people. I'm interested in literature and fiction, yes, but it's the biographies. It's the human aspect of this. And I can't explain why this is the case. It may be here, it is nature. It is genetics that's driving me here. It's the people, oftentimes, as much as the product or the artifact or the painting or the scientific theory that excites me. What's going on in this person's mind? How do they do that? It's the people.
Yeah, the people. I'm deeply interested in the people. Maybe that's why I was pulled to your work as well. You defined genius a little while ago, but I'm also interested in just knowing what isn't a genius. I thought you did a good job pulling that out, just to paint a clearer picture on who actually isn't a genius when we think
Well,
they are.
yeah. Okay. So I'm not a genius. Um, Great point. High IQ. You think as well, so and so is a genius. She's so smart. She's a genius. She's got an IQ of 145, and she just pulled 2 800s or maybe 3 800s on the SAT test. She's a genius. And the one thing I've learned over time, I really do think it's true. And I try to discuss this with my grandchildren, much to the consternation of their parents, my children, is that this high idea of a high IQ score and a super high SAT score or a super high ACT score, or great scores in the ERBs, that may not be a reliable monitor or a marker of genius. There are probably other things that are much more important to changing the world than a high IQ score. So raw intelligence, smarts, whatever that is, they come in different forms, and only a very small part of that is actually measured on a standardized test. We use them because they're standardized and they're very efficient, testing a very limited type of thing. So what genius is not is a brainiac, a kind of stereotype of the brainiac with a high IQ score.
In addition to the high IQ, you also say how there's two different things here in terms of talent and then genius, correct?
Yeah, I think lots of us are talented. I'm sure you are talented at what you do, Sean. I'm talented in some ways, having figured out what I do, but that's not genius. And as we've said before, there are successful people there are geniuses in this world, and there are successful people, and we need them both. We need the geniuses to change the world, to get us out of dilemmas such as the current pandemic, for example, and we need successful people to execute their ideas, to reify their ideas, to bring their ideas into a practical form for everyday life. So a successful person is a person who, well, let's start with the genius. The genius is a person who sort of thinks outside the box. That's the kind of paradigm there, thinking outside the box, innovative, somewhat rebellious, and so on. A successful person has probably figured out how to make the box better, or staying within the box and making it the very best possible box that it can be. And a successful person might know how to play well within that box and make that box work for them. Maybe they get into an Ivy League school, or they do well on the SAT test. They get into an Ivy League school, and then they go on to become an investment banker or something like this, or whatever the paradigm of excellence may happen to be today. But I guess the point is that they are successful people. They've learned how to play the game. Geniuses are people who change the game. They really are game changers.
Yeah, you've got one of those quotes I love, and I'm going to butcher whoever said it, and also the quote. It might have been Schumpner about talent can hit a target no one else can hit. Genius can hit a target no one else can see.
Yeah, that's Arthur Schopenhauer.
Okay.
German. No, you're doing well. I have trouble with that one too, and I can't tell you how much time I have spent trying to track back the original because that philosophy is in that book was published in 3 volumes over a 30-year period in various editions. And when did he say it? Where did he say it? And what edition do I find that original German? And what were the German words for it? And that's what a good scholar will do. And that's what I was trained to do. But that's where that comes from. A person of talent can hit the target that no one else can hit. A person of genius can hit the target that no one else can see. In other words, think or see outside the box.
No, I absolutely love that. One of the things I'm really intrigued by is just the point in time someone's living. And I'm wondering today, with access to technology and how connected we are globally, is this a point in time where there's a likelihood to have more geniuses throughout the world?
That's a very good question from a number of points of view. Is it a point in time where we're likely to have fewer geniuses than we had before? Now, a couple of a couple of thoughts here. One, there's maybe a difference between genius, exceptional human accomplishment in the arts and in human relations. We'll call them the political science, politics, whatever you want to call it. There may be a difference between that and in science and technology. To some extent, and again, this was a point that your previous guest, Matt Ridley, had emphasized, was that it's never been easier to get information because of the internet. And if one of the first steps in being a genius is to have experience and gather a great deal of information, this is a great time to be alive. As he said, because you can so quickly pull together so much information. He's absolutely right. He should tell the 20 years ago, we'd all go into a library. It's a big advantage to be a student or a professor at Yale because you had this great library. Now that advantage has been equalized all around the world because everybody has access. Nobody goes into the Yale library to look at a book anymore. They're going for coffee. They're going to talk. That's all great. But go in and pull out a book off the shelf, look at the stamp, and the last time that book was taken out of there, it's 20 years ago. Nobody's back of the stack of the book because it's all available online. So more and more information is now available. In theory, there should be more and more game-changing geniuses out there. The other interesting thing, however, is, and people ask somewhat rhetorically, was Albert Einstein the last scientific genius? In other words, solo genius, the single individual. Because as time goes on, and it's exemplified by what's happening today with the coronavirus, it's the genius of the team that is supplanting the individual genius. It's the genius of the research lab. Think about, we're now waiting for a vaccine for COVID, right? Okay, there's AstraZeneca out there, there's Pfizer, there's Moderna, there may be Merck, Johnson & Johnson. Have we heard, Sean, have you heard on the news about scientist so-and-so working at AstraZeneca, Genius B working for Moderna? No, it's all a group of people. It's a whole research lab, maybe hundreds of people doing this. Why? Because maybe so much of the information the information is so enormous that no one individual can control it all. So we need to have specialists that need to cooperate amongst themselves. So that's interesting to watch. Maybe in science and technology, it's the genius of the team that's coming to the fore in this particular day and age. And that would have been very different than, say, back in the day of Leonardo da Vinci, where he was working entirely by himself.
You mentioned this amongst the team, and then you bring up specialists, which has me wondering about the whole fox versus the hedgehog. The fox knows many things. The hedgehog knows one thing specifically. Yeah. So how do you view that now moving forward? Is it still more beneficial to be that fox, to be able to aggregate and pull from all these different domains?
Well, I have always been a great fan of, a great proponent of the fox. Go fox, go fox, go fox. I don't go around wearing a hedgehog sweatshirt, and I don't have a hedgehog hat when I go to the hedgehog fox contest. I'm a big believer in the fox because even when you look at the transformative people around the world, you look at Mozart, you look at Picasso, you look at Einstein, think, well, Einstein was just a specialist in physics. No, Einstein knew a great deal about other things. He knew a great deal about psychology, particularly about philosophy. He knew a huge amount about music. Who is his favorite composer? Mozart. He said, if I were not a physicist, I would be a professional musician. He was a violinist. He wasn't a great violinist. He was once playing a string quartet, and they stopped and they said, Albert, you have to learn to count. But he was in there. He knew about it. He knew how it worked. And I think that, and he talks about how when he has a scientific block, a kind of writer's block for scientists, he would put things aside and he would just go play Mozart for a while. It probably relaxed him. It probably took down some barriers that are blocking associative linkage in his brain. Relax, play Mozart. It's got this perfect patterning up there. He may be able to see patterns in the sciences that he didn't see up to that point. And back he would come. And we're not making this up. His son, Hans Albert, comments on this a couple of times. So it's that kind of thing. All of these A-list people, I think, whether it's Picasso, Mozart, Leonardo, Einstein, they are polymaths. They are autodidactic, self-teaching, curious polymaths. They want to know everything that they can get their hands on.
You mentioned when he's having one of those scientific mental blocks, he'll play the violin. What do you do when you're having one of those blocks and you're trying to open up the mind?
Well, I have a theory about this, and it's once again, it's the kind of thing, oh, this is such in the vernacular BS. There are things that you can do. Here's what I've learned to do. No kidding, it's true. Relaxation. You say, well, you want to be a genius, get out there and concentrate. Relaxation is hugely important for coming up with new ideas. When do I get my best ideas? There are two streams here. One is the unconscious, and psychologists, neuroscientists have worked through this, and I'm simply repeating in general terms what they've come up with. But the brain continues to operate and is thinking about things sort of subliminally, multitasking underneath there. And sometimes when we sleep, it is continuing to work. And sometimes when we wake up immediately after a deep sleep, the brain is continuing to work. And again, neuroscientists, they know all about these neurotransmitters, particularly acetylcholine, and how it's in the bloodstream at particular times and can allow you to be more creative if you capture those moments when you're accessing your subconscious and your barriers to creativity are all taken down, and you can link ideas that hitherto had not been linked. When do you do that? Particularly early in the morning, either by capturing a dream or just sitting there thinking about things in your mind. I could run through a list of a dozen major scientific breakthroughs and artistic breakthroughs by major figures that Beethoven's Stravinsky, the very discovery of acetylcholine, et cetera, the periodic table, were done as a result of work accomplished during dreams. Paul McCartney, yesterday the song came to him in a dream, he said. So first thing to do, get pen and paper and put it right next to your bed. Shower, same thing, because you get in there first thing in the morning. It's probably 70% of the great ideas we had, according to one survey, come not at the office but in the shower in the morning. Keep pen and paper right next to the shower as well, because you can forget these things. You get your ideas. What else do? I try to relax by going for a walk. You can do the same thing on the treadmill. That's fine. The only thing is you can't take your exercise very seriously. If you say, okay, don't look at your watch, say, okay, I've got, to get to 1 mile, I got to get there by 7 minutes. You see how old I am. That'd be a good day. 9 minutes, and 9 minutes, I got to get to the end of that mile by 9 minutes. Let's get going. Legs got to push. No, that's a total waste of time if you want to be creative. You've got to just get in the flow, get into a nice pattern of movement and relax and just disassociate. And curiously, the same thing happens when listening to music. You don't want to listen to the lyrics. You just want to listen to the rhythm and go with the flow. The same thing happens if you go to a beach. You can sit there and just look at the waves, and because it's this regular, relaxing pattern. Or the number of people that have been in a rocking conveyance, whether it's Beethoven, whether it's J.K. Rowling, whether it's Walt Disney, who in some kind of a conveyance, coach, or train had a major insight because of the rocking, presumably because of the relaxing quality of the repetitive rocking motion of that vehicle has allowed them to have insights that they didn't realize were in there.
Yeah, I love hearing about these. I try to tap into many of those, and it's funny. Prior to knowing the benefits of the subconscious mind working at times, you can't take advantage of these. But then once I had discovered these, even if I'd wake up in the middle of the night, I'd almost sit there and just continue to think because of the interesting creative thoughts I could come up with, and similar during times of exercise. There's times I'm not trying to peak my heart rate because I'm trying to get in that slow, steady state zone where my mind can drift off.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You probably get these things too. In the newspapers, these word scrambles where they give you 6 letters and you can't figure it out. I don't play with this very much. My wife does, and she'll look at this in the morning. And then she'll go off and exercise, and she'll come back out. Oh yeah, there it is. There it is. There it is. It's just that you're not focusing. You're relaxing, and you can just kind of have it all come into place at that particular time.
Yeah. So we're talking about defocusing. One of the things that brought up in the book, and any really successful person I've been around, I've noticed there's times that when they need to focus, they can block out every extra thing and they can just get down and focus. What did you discover about this within the geniuses you've studied?
I think that's absolutely true. So that's the flip side of this. In my book, I save those 2 chapters for the end. The penultimate one is called basically now it's relax, and the last one is called now it's time to concentrate, because you got to get the work product out the door. Okay, so you got to take those notes that you took early in the morning when you were relaxing and take them into your study. The one thing that I found studying the lives of all of these geniuses is this: there's no such thing as a lazy genius. They all are extremely hardworking. Do they think of this as work? No, it is their passion. It's what they want to do. They may be running over people all around them, just treating them like roadkill in their personal lives. But nonetheless, they do this because they're obsessive. But what they all have in common is a habit for work. So that's another hidden habit here. Get a habit for work. Now, the habits are all very different for the most part with each individual. They call them different things. They call I got to get in my flow today. I got to get in my ritual. It could be an actual habit. Got to get in my pattern, whatever term you want to use. And they get into a daily routine that is always the same. Why do they do that? They do that because it saves time. It saves psychic energy. There are no extraneous things that you have to deal with. When you get to your work zone, then it's interesting what they have in that work zone. Another thing that saves time is not to be distracted. Some people disengage from all, say, technical things such as email or internet connectivity, and they'll just sit in there and write on a computer. So that's another thing, and one can take that to various degrees of extreme. Most of us, of course, we need the internet to get information from, so we have to stay going back and forth. Another thing I like to do, and I think others do as well, is put pictures of photos of the people we love around us. I don't know why that is useful. I find it comforting. I then put some pictures I have in my off study here. I could show you and reach for them. Here, I'll reach for. That's all right. You're not going to see it anyway. I'll reach for one in which I think leading the Yale commencement. They were kind enough when I retired to let me be the grand marshal of the Yale commencement. So there I am leading the Yale commencement. I have a picture of that. And I thought that was pretty cool. I must not be a complete failure here. Each of us, we're trying to be creative. We're trying to do our own thing. But God, every morning you wake up and say, this is, you write a paragraph and you come back the next day. What could I have been thinking? This is doggerel. This is nonsense. You're worthless. This is a total waste of time. So you need these markers in your life to say, no, you're not a complete failure, because look, you did that. Maybe you can do this again. And ultimately, also, we need in our lives inspiration. And I think when in our habit of work, it helps to have in the office people we admire. I'm reminded, and sometimes you can see pictures, engravings of great people's offices. There are for example, from Johannes Brahms, and he has in his office, standing over his piano, a huge engraving of Beethoven, sort of Beethoven looking over his shoulder. With Einstein, he had he had portraits, pictures of three seminal figures in his life. Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, and don't ask me the third because I can't remember who.
2 out of 3 is good enough anyway.
Okay, it might have been Max Planck. I don't really remember. But in any event, get sort of tangible images of people you admire. I'm reaching over now just for fun and picking up a kind of a little statue here of Nikola Tesla, which I have right over there, and you can attest, because you're seeing it, our audience is not, but you can attest to the fact that it's really there. So get support around you, get love around you, and get inspiration around you.
I would love learning about your teaching process and all the years, the courses you've taught. I know you've taught even specifically on genius. What have you learned about uncovering these geniuses that have just helped you in your teaching process?
That's a good question, great question, because my approach to teaching has turned 180 degrees since I started out. I started out by thinking that the model, I think I was watching other people, and you always tend to imitate what your superiors do. So I was started out with the model of the so-called sage on the stage. Remember what that is? You go into the classroom, the kids come in, some inevitably antiquarian white male ascends the stage holding a yellow legal pad and begins to read notes, academic scripture off of the book of wisdom here. Meanwhile, the kids are falling asleep. In modern times, they'd be looking for shoes on their computer and the internet, totally tuned out. And I think the seminal moment for me came when I was reading, of all things, a passage of Virginia Woolf in A Room of One's Own, which is a superb piece of writing and a superb piece of fiction. And I have my kids in the genius class read that every day. And it's really a series of public lectures that she came. And she begins them by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, I come to you tonight not to hand you a nugget of wisdom, which you can wrap up in your notebook and take home with you." And boy, that really stuck in my mind. That's not what teaching is about. There are no such things as giving people a nugget of wisdom. So as time goes on, I began to see that, strangely enough, that the old Socratic method was far much more valuable, that you would throw out questions and you would have people, you would have a goal that maybe there is something that we could say approximates truth. You would have a goal and you would try to get people to that goal through a series of questions. As time went on, I began to refine that a bit. Yes, we need information. And there's a new book out by a gentleman named Hirsch that was reviewed recently in the Wall Street Journal. It doesn't really matter. I think that's his name, about education. And it says how we are messing up education because we're not teaching people enough facts. I would push back about that. I would say it's very important to gather facts. All of these geniuses gather facts and they bring them in. You've got to know stuff. That's the first part of the creative process. You've got to have stuff in your head. And then you've got to recombine it in new and exciting, innovative ways. So yes, we need, when teaching, to get information out there. So as time went on, what I would do would be to develop a twofold approach. One, we would get the information out there with an assigned reading. And almost puerile as it seems, then they would come into class and we would have a quiz on first thing every morning in the genius class. First 8 minutes, we would have a quiz on that reading of the previous night. Okay, that means the facts are in there. Okay, we've got the facts. Now let's have a go at it. Are the facts correct? Can you think of alternative solutions to those facts? How could those facts be combined in innovative new ways? How could someone who happened to be reared on a Navajo Indian reservation have a completely different interpretation of these facts? How can someone from Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn have a completely different view of all of this? What is truth? And it would be an argumentation. And this happened. I was able to do this a couple of times, and as time went on, people took interest in this, and I would have to cap the class at about 100 because there was no more room in the room in which I was teaching, which I liked, for that. So these arguments would break out, and the arguments would become very animated. And once it happened that as this argument was going, I was able to just sneak out of the classroom the side door. And I don't think they noticed. And that was the best class I ever taught.
It's remarkable. It's almost like your current day reading process where you're almost having these arguments against yourself. So you're seeing both sides. Is that somewhat on track there?
I guess so. Again, Sean, it's not something I ever thought of. Maybe it's like me dealing with genius. You don't know what you're doing. It takes an outsider to examine you and to see what you're doing. Maybe, do I have to pay you for this today? Am I going to get a bill from my psychiatrist, Sean DeLaney, here at the end of this session? I hope not. You may be entitled to send me one, but I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, no, I always love distilling and pulling out different threads and thoughts. Two more things I would love to hitting on in terms of geniuses. And these are things that we've somewhat hit on, and I'm just so fascinated. And the first is going to be just that rebel mentality. And is that true amongst all the geniuses? They've got a little rebelliousness in them?
They would have to, in a sense. If you're going to change the box, you've got to be able to see things outside the box. I think what really happened, you could call them the rebels, they're just annoyed. They're annoyed by something that they see, and they say, that's not right, or it could be better than that. Why not do it this way? And whether it's a painting or a scientific theory, Einstein, in effect, said to Newton, he said it very polite, and he realized he was borrowing greatly from Newton. But, what Newton was saying, the theory of gravity, is just not quite right there. What Picasso started painting with, something as famous as Mademoiselle d'Avignon, which is now the iconic piece in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, it would look crazy at the time, but that's what he thought was really involved in art. That's what he thought the message of art was. So you could call them rebels. You could call them outsiders. They are comfortable with being outsiders. They are comfortable with not being immediately appreciated because they are so convinced that their vision of the world, what the world might be, is correct, that they are willing to persevere in the face of negativity and denial.
Is that how the relationship with the risk evolves? Where they almost don't view risk the same way because they have such a deep-seated belief?
Wow. That's a very interesting way of looking at it. I hadn't looked at it in that fashion. Excuse me, Sean, I want to phone into my editor. Stop the presses. We got to insert a new thought here. I hadn't really thought of that, is that the correlation between self-confidence and risk. They can't believe that they're going to get it wrong. I was looking at it from the point of view, well, these are just very courageous people, that they realize that there are liabilities out there, dangers out there, but they're willing to assume this liability or this danger. It may be, as you were suggesting, that they don't see the dangers. They have such enormous self-confidence in their vision that they are able to pursue that vision, not being aware of the dangers. They couldn't possibly be wrong, so this must be the right path. There is no risk here. I'm right.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to continue to monitor that against some of the current day geniuses, and maybe in another 100 years we'll
Yeah,
get to explore that one a
yeah,
little bit further.
yeah, yeah.
But there's three
Well,
geniuses.
yeah, that's a good point, though. Sorry to interrupt, but that's a good point, because with all of this, as one of the criteria of my definition of genius is duration. This has to last over a period of time. You can't be an overnight, have 5 minutes of success and everybody forgets you. So over time, we'll have to wait. You're absolutely right, Sean. We'll have to wait and come. We'll reassemble in 100 years and see how this is turning out.
No, I would love to do that. So there's three geniuses that I've just been fascinated with for a while, and I would love to just hear your just short couple sentence paragraph riff on each one, and the first one being Einstein.
Interesting figure, a great mind, not necessarily a great human being. Externally a great human being, concerned about the welfare of all, but internally within his own family, whether it was a daughter, an illegitimate daughter that he sired and simply allowed to be forgotten, or whether it was his second of three children that he had institutionalized in Switzerland and never visited for the last 10 years of his life. It's and what he did with the money that was supposed to go to Maleva Marak, his first wife. It's not a happy story in that regard. It brings up the issue of sort of public persona of the genius and private reality. So, fascinating person, just the go-to guy for a book on genius, but it points out some other things about genius.
What about your music man, Mozart?
Love him. If there were one guy you'd want to invite to dinner, it would be Mozart. Why? Because contrary to what you might think, he was a polymath. He knew a lot of stuff about a lot of different things, particularly mathematics. He was enormously curious. He was enamored with puzzles and games. He was a prankster. He was hugely funny. Just riffing on jokes instantly, and plays on words because he could speak 5 languages fluently. He was a great dancer. He was apparently a great lover. So, and by the way, did I mention he happened to be maybe the finest musical composer who ever lived? So I think it'd be Mozart, because if he wasn't telling a joke, he could hop right over to the piano and entertain you in that fashion, and you'd be delighted to sit there for hours.
Yeah, no, being honest, I haven't actually even dove into any of Mozart's biographies or writings about him. I listen to his music quite frequently when I'm trying to read. But
hey, Sean, I got a great tip for you. Just go watch the film Amadeus. It's not absolutely correct about Mozart, but it's an old film now. It's now 35 years old, but it did win 12 Academy Awards, which is the highest number, I believe, ever accumulated by one film. Amadeus, about 1985. Go watch that. It's a quick and fun and hugely entertaining entry into Mozart.
I'll definitely have to do that. And then what about Leonardo da Vinci?
If I were to say it would be a tie, I think, between who are the greatest genius in your experience, and I'm dealing here essentially with geniuses in the history of Western culture. Who are the two greatest geniuses that you ran into in your study? I would say coming in in second position would be William Shakespeare, because all of the human mind, all of the human experiences, the loves, the hates, the envy, the failure, the hopes, they're all in there. And he knew them, and he is able to. It is extraordinary. We could almost sign off, quit the rest of our lives, and just go read Shakespeare, because it would save time. It's all in there. And coming in first place as the world's all-time unbelievable genius, it would have to be Leonardo da Vinci. First of all, he had no education. He was an illegitimate child, and he could not be educated in traditional terms. In retrospect, that may have been a huge advantage, because he had to go out there and figure out all of this stuff himself. And he tried to figure out everything. He'd go up to the tops of mountains in the Apennines there, and what would he find? He'd find fossils of fish. How did fish bones get up here? How old is this earth? So he's interested in geology. He's interested in visual aspects of distance, perception. He's interested in zoology, in that he studying animals and figures out, lo and behold, that when a dragonfly flies, its back two wings are up higher than the front two wings. Who knew that? Who can see that? How do you have this kind of power of observation to know that? And on it goes. He took apart things. He took apart machines to figure out how they work, and in so doing, figured out how new machines work. And most importantly, he took apart the human body through his dissections. And he totally rewrote, although people at the time didn't know it, he totally rewrote the textbook of human anatomy, how the heart works. It actually has 4 chambers, not 2 chambers. He identified arteriosclerosis, for example. He figured out that we actually see by light coming into our eyes rather than a kind of flashlight effect with light going outside of our eyes. My favorite quote of Leonardo da Vinci, and maybe I should stop with this, is the following. He writes in one of his notebooks, "Read me well, O reader, for you will never see my likes again." And that sounds like hubris, but in my opinion, he was right.
Yeah, I've had deep fascinated with Leonardo for a long time now, so I love that riff right there, getting to hear more about him. A couple more questions I would love knowing, though, because in your book throughout, you link to so many different sources, and you're clearly so widely read. Have there been just a couple books throughout your life that have had tremendous impact for you?
Books that really, I think 2 books. One seems a strange book and nobody ever really reads. It's called The Measure of Reality by Alfred Crosby. Measure of Reality by Alfred Crosby. Alfred Crosby was a biologist, epidemiologist who taught at the University of Texas. But he was not a medievalist. And he was not necessarily trained as a mathematician, but he writes about, this is all about quantification in the West at the end of the Middle Ages, how the Western world came to see the world differently than the rest of the world at that particular time, than from the Mideast or the Far East. And it had to do with bringing in measurement, and measurement in terms of distances, measurement in terms of organ pipes, measurement in terms of just calculation so that commerce could develop. So that's The Measure of Reality by Alfred Crosby, a little known book, but it always had, it was very impressive in my life. Another book that impressed me and that I think influenced me was, strangely enough, James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Because it sort of it gives you a sense of what it would. I mean, Joyce is clearly a genius. If you could just write a portrait of an artist as a young man, you'd have to be a genius, because so many people have read it. I have read it and it influenced my life. It changed the world, at least it changed my world. Because it gives you a sense of what an average, in this case usually above average person, goes through in the course of their development, experiences, and suggests that these are things that happen, and these are things that can happen. And if they happen to him, they could happen to you. So it's a springboard, in a sense, for people launching into life as they begin their life's journey. So that's James Joyce, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man.
2 books I've never read, so I love getting new recommendations. Final one, though. If you could only listen to one more piece of music the rest of your life, what would that be?
That's a good question. Coming in, once again, number 2 would be, we all love Beethoven, and we all think of Beethoven as the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth this year, 2020. We all love Beethoven. And I suppose the one piece of Beethoven that we all know is the Ode to Joy of the Ninth Symphony. Okay, so we all know that. But there's another movement in that symphony, another section of that symphony, the slow movement. That's very, very beautiful. But and I think that it's slow, it is majestic, it is thoughtful, it is humane, and it is restful. So in terms of what are you going to be listening to, Craig, as you check out of this world, that would be number two. Number one, as when I check out, is going to be the following. I have now been married happily for 42 years to my beloved wife, Sherry. There was a piece written by Richard Strauss called Im Abendrot, in the red glow of sunset. And it's about sunset being used as a metaphor for life and the love between these two individuals. And it was written as a song dedicated to his wife, to whom he had then been married, I think, 50 some years, Pauline. And it's exquisitely beautiful. I would write that down. It's late flamboyant, romantic style, but it's both heroic, it's both soothing, it's both exhilarating and exquisitely beautiful. And it as I say, in life, you cannot really appreciate beauty unless you share it with someone whom you love. And I think that's true. So maybe you have to listen to this with somebody else, or at the very least, you have to listen to this thinking of someone else, knowing that that someone else, either in your imagination or in reality, actually exists.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a better place to wrap up there. Craig Wright, the book is The Hidden Habits of Genius, Beyond Talent, IQ, and Grit, Unlocking the Secrets of Greatness. This was a book I really did enjoy. Of course, we're going to have it linked up in the show notes and provide the listeners every available access to purchase the book. Anything else you want them knowing about the book or yourself?
No, I feel obliged because there's a wonderful team working behind me. Once again, say if you need it, all you have to do is go to Amazon and punch in the search box there, Craig Wright Genius, and the book will come up. That's one thing I'd like to say. The final thing I would like to say is thank you, Sean, very much for inviting me. I had fun. I hope I don't get arrested, and I hope one day or another you will invite me back again. So thanks to you, Sean.
No,
Bye-bye.
thank you. This is a true pleasure. Once again, thanks for joining us on What Got You There. You guys made it to the end of another episode of What Got You There. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen all the way through. If you found value in this, the best way you can support the show is giving us a review, rating it, sharing it with your friends, and also sharing on social. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Looking forward to you guys listening to another episode.